For the first 30 seconds of this video, here is everything you are about to experience condensed into one chilling promise. Because this is not just a scary story but a slow descent into a nightmare that blurs obsession, sleep, memory, and fear. A journey that begins with harmless research about Freddy Krueger and ends in a dream that refuses to let go. A nightmare that evolves, adapts, and follows the mind beyond sleep, leaving behind exhaustion, dread, and the terrifying suspicion that some ideas become dangerous once they are studied too closely. It started as curiosity, the kind that feels safe because it hides behind analysis and logic, because studying a fictional horror icon feels controlled, distant, and harmless, especially when approached academically. Through articles, film breakdowns, psychological interpretations, and fan theories that attempt to dissect Freddy Krueger as a cultural symbol rather than a threat. The room was quiet, lit by the cold glow of a screen, surrounded by notes about dream logic, fear conditioning, and the way the human brain responds to repeated imagery during late-night focus. All of it framed as research rather than fascination. All of it justified as preparation rather than obsession. Hours passed unnoticed because time behaves strangely when the mind locks onto a single subject, and the more the research expanded, the more Freddy Krueger transformed from a movie villain into an idea, a representation of invasive fear that thrives where consciousness weakens. Articles described him as a nightmare parasite, a figure designed to imprint itself through repetition, sound, color, and rhythm, while others explored how dream-based horror bypasses rational defenses and targets the most primitive survival instincts. And with each paragraph, the boundary between analysis and imagination grew thinner. Fatigue arrived quietly, disguised as comfort. As the eyes grew heavy and the body relaxed into the chair, convinced that rest could come without consequence, convinced that sleep was simply a biological reset rather than a vulnerable state. The last thing visible before drifting off was an image paused on the screen. Freddy's silhouette frozen mid-motion, his outline burned into the retina just long enough to linger when the lights dimmed inside the mind. Sleep did not come gently, because the transition felt abrupt, like stepping through a door that closed too fast behind. And the dream formed instantly, not gradually, placing the dreamer inside a familiar but distorted space where hallways stretched longer than memory allowed, and light sources flickered without rhythm. The awareness of dreaming arrived early, accompanied by the comforting assumption of control, because knowing it is a dream usually provides safety. But that assumption shattered when the environment refused to respond, when movement felt delayed, and when every attempt to wake up led only deeper into the same place. The nightmare began without spectacle, without sudden violence, because it relied on anticipation rather than shock, using sound instead of sight. Distant metallic scraping echoing through empty corridors, each repetition closer than the last. The mind searched for logic, reminding itself of research, of fiction, of symbolic interpretation, but logic dissolved as the dream adapted, shifting angles, tightening spaces, and removing exits as if responding directly to awareness itself. Fear intensified not because Freddy appeared immediately, but because he did not. Because absence created expectation, and expectation fed dread. The environment began to repeat itself, doors leading back to the same rooms, clocks with unmoving hands and reflections that lagged slightly behind. Movement, subtle signs that the dream was no longer random but structured, behaving like a trap designed to keep attention focused and escape impossible. When Freddy finally emerged, it was not as a clear image but as a presence, a distortion in the dream's texture, a sense of being observed from angles that should not exist. The research returned involuntarily, recalling descriptions of nightmare figures forming from accumulated fear and familiarity, and the realization struck that studying Freddy had provided the mind with detailed blueprints, giving the dream everything it needed to build something convincing, something personal, something terrifyingly precise. The nightmare escalated without violence, using proximity rather than attack, forcing awareness of being followed without offering confrontation, dragging time into long, suffocating stretches where every step forward felt heavier and every attempt to run resulted in sinking floors and narrowing paths. The sound of breathing grew louder, synchronized with the dreamer's own, blurring the line between internal fear and external threat until the distinction no longer mattered. False awakenings followed, each one crueler than the last. Moments of relief shattered by small inconsistencies. A light that flickered incorrectly, a shadow that lingered too long, a sense that the room was watching rather than containing. Each realization triggered another descent, another layer of the same nightmare, reinforcing the horrifying lesson that waking up did not mean escape, only relocation within the same system. Exhaustion replaced panic, because the nightmare seemed endless, looping through variations of the same fear while draining resistance, creating the sense that surrender might be the only way out. Freddy's presence grew stronger as fear weakened, no longer hiding in shadows but shaping the environment itself, turning walls into obstacles and silence into pressure, existing not as a character but as a rule. The dream obeyed. The moment of awakening came suddenly, violently, with lungs gasping for air, and muscles locked in place. The room dark and silent, except for the echo of the nightmare still vibrating inside the skull. Relief was immediate, but incomplete, because the fear did not vanish with consciousness, lingering instead as a heavy awareness that something had crossed from imagination into memory, that the dream had left a mark deeper than expected. Sleep became difficult afterward, not because of fear of Freddy himself, but because of fear of the mind's ability to create something so immersive, so adaptive, and so resistant to control. The research notes felt different in the daylight, no longer academic but cautionary. Reminders that certain symbols carry weight beyond entertainment, especially when studied during exhaustion, when the boundary between thought and dream grows thin. The nightmare did not return in the same form, but traces of it surfaced in moments of drowsiness, in reflections caught too late, in the sensation of being watched during half-sleep, suggesting that while the dream had ended, its influence had not. Freddy Krueger remained what he had always been, not a monster that kills bodies, but an idea that invades rest, punishes vulnerability, and thrives on attention. This story is not a warning against movies or curiosity, but a reminder that some fears are designed to linger, to follow, and to wait patiently for the moment defenses drop. If this video kept you watching until the end, if it made you reconsider what you allow into your mind before sleep, then subscribe to the channel, leave a comment with your thoughts or experiences, and share this video with someone who believes nightmares end when you wake up, because sometimes the real horror begins afterward.